Awesome. Well, everybody, it's 2:03. We like to get started 3 minutes late on time. So it's like it is on time because the plan was always 2:03, but it is 3 minutes late. So everybody, welcome. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining. If you have questions throughout, the Q&A is open, the chat is open, and you're welcome to ask them. But I am very excited because I am speaking today with Ashley Scott, who's the ESG manager at Valvoline, a 150-year-old brand. And it's been through a lot in the last couple of years. You probably know Valvoline as a motor oil, famous bottle with their logo on there. That is actually not the Valvoline we're talking about today. That company split apart from the sort of mechanic oil change, kind of like a Jiffy Lube-esque service, a couple of years ago. And so Ashley's the manager for a almost 2,000 location, complicated business across the United States and Canada. And so I'm very, very excited to chat. So Ashley, I appreciate you joining. Where I wanted to start off is the comparison between an earlier role you had in sustainability at Campbell's Soup Company, and
Mhm.
that I think was in 2020 or so,
Yep.
and what you're doing today at Valvoline. Where's the industry or the work that you're doing evolved in a really good way? And you're like, wow, like this is what we dreamed of 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And what are you frustrated by? What's not as good as you might have hoped it would be?
So I would say that from the reporting side, because every role that I've held in this field, there's always been that core element of reporting. So back in 2020, when I worked for Campbell Soup, we were in that voluntary sustainability reporting space, kind of seeing where we are today, where there are some regulatory requirements coming about in, Europe, Australia, China, all different parts of the world. I know the US is kind of fumbling back on that one from the SEC, but states will come up with their own rules for reporting. So I think that compulsory component of it is nice. I know some folks probably don't love that, but why I like it is because I think it brings an additional layer of rigor to that reporting process and requires a very auditable trail. So, you know, a lot of companies still do things in a very manual way, but I think having these regulatory requirements in place from a reporting perspective will help bring more, hopefully, process to the process, right? And then the other part of that that's very much related is wow, the alphabet soup is shrinking. So I remember it was like corporate nights, DJSI, CDP, water, climate, forest, like there are just so many things to report against, and that makes it very difficult for a very lean team to do strategy, execute the strategy, get the reporting out, talk about the reporting, and then continue the work. So I think seeing convergence there is nice. Small example, S&P Global's corporate sustainability assessment. They're like, hey, if you report in CDP, we can now pull over your responses. So that's just another example of
That's
how
amazing
these,
because I do feel
yeah,
like a few years ago, everyone was trying to start their own and compete, partially because these rating agencies are
you're
amazing
right.
businesses. The amount of money that they
Hmm.
make is good for them, I guess.
Yeah.
But then so that was slightly inspiring 5, 10 years ago because, oh,
Right.
look at all this stuff happening, but it became so burdensome. And now the fact that they're converging, that's a very big deal. It just makes your
Hmm.
job less like just plugging in numbers in different places and more, how do I do this really, really, really well once and then get back to work?
Hmm. And I'd say the thing that I don't like that still persists is how lean ESG, sustainability, impact, how lean these teams are. I think that we're more dynamic and impactful than we're given credit for. We definitely do a lot more with a lot less. So I think that is still the thing that is frustrating, being seen as a cost center rather than, a revenue generator or even a
Mhm.
cost saving center. I think that that's what still frustrates me. And I know it's only been a few years since I worked at Campbell, but seeing little progress in that area today, I mean, I think it will get better, but it's still one of those where you see folks, two, three members of a team, and the company is huge. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's you'd never see a two-person marketing team at a publicly
no.
traded company. Um,
No.
that is really hard. But let's talk about that a little bit in the context of Valvoline. So, like I said, you guys are approximately 1,000 or so locations that you own, another
Mhm.
1,000 or so that are franchised all over the United States and Canada. These are like we'll call them mechanic shops, basically car service shops. So you're like in a multiple high emitting industries, right? You own real estate, you use a ton of energy, you work in automotive. Um, those are like those are the big ones. Those
Yeah.
are that's what the world all needs to do. So in some ways, there's the dark negative outlook on here. It's like, oh, Valvoline's no good. Look at all these terrible things that they're doing. The positive side, the way I would see it is yeah, people, we got cars, and yeah, they need to be
Right.
serviced. Think about the opportunity if Valvoline can play a role in moving to electric vehicles and buying more clean energy for the shops that it uses, and keeping employees safe from natural disasters because you employ so many tens of thousands of people. So that is the like third party view. Tell
Mhm.
me within Valvoline, especially tying to what you just said about like we're a small team doing a lot of things. Where's the view kind of what you want it to be like? Yeah, this is where the opportunity is, and these are where the conversations are. And then what's next? Like, where would we like to continue to see that improve?
Yeah, so I think one really important thing to note, and you did mention this at the beginning, in 2023, so March of 2023, we divested the global manufacturing operations portion of our business, which most people are familiar with. So the motor oil, Formula One racing, like all of that, that business is no longer under our umbrella. So at that time, when you think about where you want to focus, you focus on the thing that seems to be the worst. And what I mean by that is manufacturing operations was extremely energy intensive, water intensive. There was just so much intensity within those operations that that's where the majority of the focus was when it came to our sustainability
Mm.
efforts. So post divestiture, we're essentially starting over on that sustainability journey, seeing what really makes sense for us as a business, the way we exist today. Again, we're retail focused now, so we're not in the oil and chemicals
Mhm.
industry, although we obviously use those products. I would say what I would like to see is us really move forward in the energy management space. We have geographically dispersed locations that are between 1,500 and 2,500 square feet. So they're about the size of, like an average sized home. Um, Tiny rooftops. So solutions that would work for our industry peers probably don't work for us or won't work for us. A good example of that, if we want to reduce our energy use, on-site solar is like the first thing that comes to mind. I used to work for a company in the commercial solar space. Commercial solar partners don't want to work with us because our rooftops are so small and we're so geographically dispersed in states that may or may not be solar friendly. The juice really isn't worth the squeeze for them, and the incentives for us aren't too palatable either. So, what seems like low hanging fruit, it's really not. We have to get creative about the ways that we manage energy. So, I would like to see us focus more in that area because I do see a ton of opportunity for us in that space. But ultimately, I'm still surprised by how much we already do. Before I started working for this company, I mean, this is going to sound terrible, but it's honest. I had this like view in my head because I grew up in shops. So I'm like, oh, it's dirty. It's, like they just throw stuff down the drain. That is not how it works here. Literally everything that we use to perform services on vehicles is recycled and re-refined. So the waste oil that we take out of the vehicle, we send that for re-refining. The air filters, same thing. Oil filters, battery cores, all of that. So I think that we have areas of opportunity in energy management, and I'd like to see my focus shift there over the next year to really dig into that because, like I said, we are geographically dispersed, unique challenges present, and it really does take that layered approach to kind of tackle all those issues.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way of putting it. When I started working in the climate world, we initially talked as if the answers were obvious.
Mhm.
It was like, yeah, like you have rooftops, buy solar. Duh.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
what do you do? But then the nuance around these things is insane. Like, okay, buy solar. Who puts up the money up front? Does the state have a
Mhm.
tax credit? Is my roof big enough? Is my roof flat? Is my roof
Is my
angled
roof
in the right
strong?
way? Is my roof
Yeah.
strong? Like, so like the duh answers that people began thinking about, call it 10 years ago, where the corporate sustainability movement started growing, but really, 3, 4, 5 years ago, um, they're not so easy.
Mm-mm.
What is something that you are really proud of Valvoline for doing or beginning to work on, or you think is a really interesting initiative that other companies can learn from that is beginning to succeed?
Mhm.
And this could be around like
And there's
energy,
so
this could be
many.
around environmentalism, this could be around like how you protect people or human capital, any of those.
So I was going to go with something environmental, but since you mentioned people, something that is extremely unique, at least in my opinion, about Valvoline is how people focused the company is. I think from the outside, someone wouldn't really notice that, but
Hmm.
we really do take the safety of our workers just it's all the way up here. Like say this is
Hmm.
this is table stakes, like we're higher than that. We really put a lot of thought and effort into our super pro process as well as all of our safety trainings and then the engagement around employee safety. I think something that I'm proud of is what actually came out of us working with Beehive. Using the tool, we were very, very quickly able to assess where future vulnerabilities may present when it comes to a chronic risk of heat. And we see increasing temperatures all over, right? But being able to see that all on one screen just very quickly, I was like, hey, we have a heat injury and illness prevention plan in place. Who's seeing that? Who's required to do
Hmm.
that? So um, OSHA is likely not going to move forward with their federal level regulation under this administration, but states are popping up with their own HIP requirements. That's the cool word, get HIP. So the heat injury and illness prevention plans, we have them, but only 2 states are required to go through that training. But now that I have these results from the assessment that we performed using Beehive, I can say, hey, it looks like these states are also going to experience, increased heat. I think that we should roll this out to more states, to more employees, and make sure that this is available to everyone. Because honestly, it does not hurt to take a proactive step and enable and empower people to take action. If I look like I'm going to pass out, like even just a guest, like if I look like I'm suffering from heat stress, I would hope that someone would do something for me.
Hmm.
So that's something that I'm pretty proud of, and that's a very recent um, initiative here. Like talking to the safety team, seeing where we can take that, and using the results, like using that data to drive a strategic decision.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I was going to jump to this later, but let's talk a little bit about how you use the Beehive results to assess these risks. So, what Beehive provides for folks who don't know is basically we said, hey, here's all of your locations for you guys, those are your 2000 or so shops, and here's the heat risk or wildfire risk or flood risks that exist there, and you could do a little bit of scenario analysis. So what does that look like in this year, in 10 years, if climate change is bad, not so bad, whatever. We provide you with a visualization, then you can export all of that into a spreadsheet. But you did a lot of work after the fact, and that
Mhm.
started with quantifying the risks, and
Mhm.
then it went into stakeholder engagement to say, hello people, like here's what we need to do. So walk through those couple of steps. What did the quantification look like first? What I mean, you had to make a bunch of assumptions there, and so like
Mhm.
what was the process like to quantify those risks? Where was the data that Beehive gave you helpful and easy to work with, and what are some things that would have been even better if we did that with and for you?
Yeah, so to give the folks that are listening a little bit of insight, we had been working in this our climate related risks and opportunities working group for about 7 or 8 months before we started to use the Beehive tool. So just putting 7, 8 months into perspective, when we got the Beehive tool, we were able to finish in a month. So that right there just kind of shows you how efficient you can be when you do have the right tools in place. What the process looked like for us, because this was our first TCFD aligned assessment, especially as a new company so to speak, like new in the sense that we're now solely retail. We looked at everything, but I wanted it to be as simple as possible. I think one of the challenges that presents every time you have a working group is my priorities probably aren't the same as the other group's members' priorities. So I have to be okay with that and I have to plan for that. And I also have to realize that they're not living in the same world that I live in with respect to environmental impact. Like they might be in accounting or procurement or another function. So they don't think about emissions. They don't think about energy use intensity. Like they're not thinking about those things. So in this group, being able to use the Beehive tool and actually show, visualize like, hey, look, here are all of our franchise locations. Here are all of our company owned locations. Here's everything. This is where we're seeing risk. Like I was actually able to explain the different scenarios very easily using the tool, because when you hover over, the little icon pops up and it shows you the message on the side. I could quickly see what peers or other companies like ours were saying and doing using the AI function and using that very quick, I don't know exactly what you call it, but the
Like
feature
the
that's on the
benchmarking
side.
section. Yeah.
Yes, that
Yeah.
side feature of things that would have taken me 9 hours take 9 seconds. So that really helped me be able to take a step back and figure out, okay, what is the best approach for this working group, knowing that the majority of people in the group are from the finance arm of the company. I looked at our ERM process and I looked at our ERM thresholds, and I really thought about the things that kind of move the needle for the company, and being able to quantify something that that's something people can wrap their heads around, right? I can't just say like, we got to do it because it's good for the planet. Yes, that is true. But here's the other side of that. We talk about money, we talk about savings. So the way that we quantified that, when you think about all the stores that are in, the probable future path of an extreme weather event, what is the average sales revenue per sales day for that store? So using real numbers from the prior fiscal year, we basically just mapped this store to this amount, this store to this amount. And to your point about making assumptions, we did have to make some, because I couldn't find any good data and I didn't have any first party information about how many days a store may close after experiencing a flood, a wildfire. Like I couldn't find that information, and the EPA's website said that nearly 40% of businesses that experience an extreme weather event do not reopen. I was like, oh, that's pretty high. So I came up with 4 buckets to kind of put the sales numbers in. A seven sales day closure, a 14-day sales closure, 21-day sales closure,
Just
and then
basically like
permanent.
gut check this. Like, hey,
Yeah,
we're gonna run the exercise. Let's make some assumptions. This is really bad. This is not so bad.
right,
You
right.
could
This
play
is
with the number
minimal. This
easily,
is
but yeah.
catastrophic. Like this
Yeah.
is permanently closed. And
Yeah.
then from there, really just multiplying the closure days by that average sales per day number
Mhm.
to get like that full picture of what it could
Mhm.
look like. And then best case scenario, it's one store is impacted in this geography. Worst case, literally all of them at the same exact time. So
Mhm.
being able to kind of look at it both in a very liberal way and a very conservative way, like looking at both sides of the estimation. I think
Mhm.
that was really helpful. And honestly, if we didn't have the Beehive tool, I think I'd probably still be working on this today. Not a joke. I'm very
So
serious.
that's a pull quote if I've ever heard one. Well, I'm very glad. For what it's worth, you found us. I still don't remember exactly how, but one day I saw a LinkedIn message pop up from Ashley. I was like, oh, let's do this thing. Um, I appreciate that. I want to go a little bit deeper into the stakeholder engagement side of that. So you talked about this quantifying the risks was because you had a lot of finance people on your working group.
Mhm.
You also said that your priorities are not their priorities. That is always the
Yes.
case with any cross-functional work, which is, by the way, why I'm always so bad at working inside of a big company. Um, I had a real job once, and I was like, my priorities are everybody's priorities, and everyone was like, we have no idea who you are. Be quiet. So that's why I am where I am. But your appreciation that other people have different priorities, and your job is to make this fit their version of the world, I think is what many successful ESG people do, which is great. My marketer is trying to get me more leads. How can I use this to do that? My finance team is trying to save me money. How can I use them to do that? My compliance team is trying to make sure I follow every law. How can I use them to do that? Who on your team has been most responsive to the work that you are doing, either related to climate risk or ESG more generally? Who has been your best friend in this work? And then who do you think teams should be bringing along more than they currently are?
Hmm. I feel like I need to take notes for myself. So, um, my best friend, who you had an opportunity to meet, I would say is Jordan. I have a counterpart that works on the E of ESG with me very closely, and she has been great in helping me understand not just elements of the business, but really the culture and how to effectively communicate. She has a better relationship with the stores than I do. I'm a little bit far removed. So think of it as like I'm enterprise strategy and Jordan is in-store implementation on the environmental side. So I think she has been extremely helpful and her group has been extremely helpful. So she sits in the operations side. Everyone from our COO to the VPs of East and West operations are extremely approachable. They have been supporters from the get-go. I would say one of the biggest supporters as well is our chief legal officer. She's very passionate about the sustainability realm and also community impact. So I think that is one huge supporter for this work. Also, just thinking a little bit deeper in the operations group, facilities and maintenance, like those folks, they sit under real estate, but there's a lot of crossover between operations. So they have definitely been strong allies. And I'd say more people to bring along. I would like to bring more employees along. I'm still at the point where I am building, and when I say employees, I mean more folks that are out in the stores, right?
Mm,
I think trying to bring people along on the journey when you're a lean team and you're trying to figure out, what's next, you really just start building the relationships that you can, and then you just kind of work out from there. So it's like the drop in the water and then all the ripples. That's sort of the process here when it comes to building relationships, making sure that you're getting support. And I would say one, not necessarily unlikely supporter, but one person's group that I work with immensely is like our external reporting group. So the folks that pull together the SEC reporting, as well as our chief audit executive, like anything related to the ERM process, like they are big supporter and they're the one that comments first on any disclosures we're pulling together, asks questions about the process, like really tries to understand at a more deeper level how things are being done when we're assessing an issue on the ESG side. So I would say those are all the supporters, but I'd love to be able to get more involved with our store employees and showing them
yeah.
how they can contribute to the work that we do.
Yeah. Just a reminder for folks, the chat is open in the Q&A as well. So if you have specific questions, you can drop them in there. Um, One thing I think you do really well is kind of related to what I was just asking, but you make an effort to understand where people are coming from and also appreciate that not everyone is where you're at.
Mhm.
So Valvoline as an old company, old slash new, but 150-year-old company, headquartered in Kentucky, in the automotive industry, people have different priorities and different perceptions of how important or unimportant work and environment is.
Mhm.
What is your strategy or your advice to 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 work with people who do not believe in the core work of ESG, who say this is not a good use of financial resources, who say this is not a good use of time? I know some people who just say, ignore them. You're always gonna have haters or whatever. Haters being,
Right, right.
like there's people who, all
Haters
right,
gonna hate.
haters gonna hate it. Like maybe in 5 years they won't, or maybe they still will. Other people who say absolutely not. Like you have to work with everybody, and here's how we do that. Other people who say, speak their language. You can hate ESG, but you love money. Like, let's talk money.
Right.
What is your approach, and how much do you lean into? Let me work more with these people, or lean into I work. I put my resources and my time, my effort into people who are already see the value here.
So thinking about like bringing skeptics along for the ride when it comes to ESG, you don't talk about ESG. I was naive, and I'm going to take it back to when I officially pivoted into this space. I was extremely naive. I walked in with those rose-colored glasses thinking that, oh, if a company had an ESG team or a sustainability team, then everybody here cares. Like everyone cares. And I was in for a rude awakening because there are people who will just discount you based off of your title. And unfortunately, my title has the 3 trigger letters in it. So ESG manager, I can't get away from it when I introduce myself. But skeptics usually don't want to talk about ESG. So you really need to figure out what they do want to talk about and what motivates them. So I would say I take a hybrid approach of all the things that you had mentioned. I really think it's important that you do work with everyone because at the end of the day, people actually do care. They just don't care about the words that you're choosing. So what you say matters. And I'll just provide an example with respect to emissions. So I care about greenhouse gas emissions because this is the world that I live in. I'm a greenhouse gas accounting subject matter expert. Like I know why the little e in CO2e is important. But if I waltz into a workplace conversation and say, hey, we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions because it's good for the planet, and I need your support to implement a climate action program for our ESG strategy, I lost them. I go into most conversations now assuming that everyone's a skeptic. And what I don't do is talk about ESG. I talk about the core issue, which in the case of emissions reduction efforts would really be energy efficiency, smart metering, energy management systems, remote monitoring of water consumption, and then really talk about that ROI because as you mentioned, like money talks. So talk about the return on the investment or talk about the time that you can save the teams that are responding to issues. Honestly, my job is big, but one crucial element when it comes to success in this space is realizing it's more about change management principles and psychology. And you really have to meet people where they are and figure out what motivates them so that you can move forward. You're always going to find people that you don't want to work with or that are difficult to work with, regardless of the space that you're in. And it's usually about taking a step back and trying to figure out the best approach to a conversation with them. But honestly, I mean, it would be really nice if everybody was on the same page about why emissions matter or, something like that. But I do think that people genuinely care. It's just about the language that we use.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Before this, I worked in carbon accounting for 3 years, and
Yep.
I
That's
still
how we
can't.
met.
That's how we met. That's right. That's how we met.
Yes.
Um, and I still can't explain what 1 metric ton of CO2e is.
Yeah.
Where, like, where is like what? And I worked in it, and so my point being that if you didn't work in it, you certainly have no clue what it is. It just means something out there. It means something out there.
Yeah.
But if you are a marketer, what does it mean? It means the opportunity to get in front of your clients with services that they care about. If you're in operations, what does it mean? It means kilowatt hours. It's just a
Hmm.
certain translation. So you always got to do the translating for them. I
Yeah.
want to ask one final question here
Yeah.
about your focus and your roadmap for the year. What is something that you really want to get done in the next 12 months that you'll be really proud of if you and the company accomplish related to your work? And what is one thing that you think, not specific to Valvoline necessarily, but that people spend too much time on, where there are a lot of turning hamster wheels here?
Hmm. So I'll start with the last part. I think a lot of people focus too much on reporting for the wrong reason. Like reporting results are kind of a look back, right? So when I think about ESG, I think about it as a framework and something to guide me. So the results or the score that I receive in whatever rater, ranker, or platform, that is reflective of work that's already been done. But if I see that, I'll just use grades, for example, that I've gotten a poor grade in this one particular subject, what topics do I need to study up on to improve my score overall in that subject? I think that that's, really important. But what I see is people not actually doing that next part, which is like needing to focus on something and then moving it forward because they've spent so much time focused on reporting. What I would like to see happen over the next 12 months is for us to work on, I would say that energy management component, because like I mentioned, there is a pretty big opportunity there in my eyes when it comes to reducing our environmental impact. But again, it comes with unique challenges, and I actually really like solving problems and facing challenges head on. So that's probably why I want to go in that direction.
Mhm.
Anything around better management of our utilities. And this part that a lot of folks don't know is some of our facilities are ground ups that we built ourselves. And we've got, low flow faucets. We've got, these more efficient toilets that have like the 1 or 2 button. Not going
Mhm.
into detail for that. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. So we have these functions that we've built in, but we also have a lot of stores that we've acquired, some that share meters with car washes. So it's really difficult to ascertain exactly how much water we're consuming for that site. It could look like there's a huge leak, but there's not. There's just a million cars going through. So I'd really like to focus in that area and get just a better single source of truth when it comes to that information, because I think it's extremely powerful, not just for me, but for facilities and maintenance, for real estate, for other groups in the company. So over the next 12 months, I think that's what I'd really like to see us focus on, is all of the utilities, water as a shared resource, natural gas, electricity, see what we can do there.
Amazing. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for everything you're doing at Valvoline. Thank you for being an early Beehive supporter. I appreciate you and thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.